Okay, so Father Bulso and I are back here in the library again. Last time we were here together, we made some recommendations for movies for all of you to watch during lockdown. So the lockdown seems to have gone on longer than we thought, so we thought maybe we would recommend some books to read. And I originally thought about fiction. Not all the books that I'm going to recommend are fiction, but they're all narrative in structure. So
I think all mine are fiction.
okay, so I didn't follow through exactly. In fact, the first one is not fiction, but it is a gripping story. It's a book called Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. And Jon Krakauer is a journalist, so the books that he writes are very riveting, definitely page turners. And this one is about a young man who went into the wilderness and what happened to him. So there's also one that I really loved that I didn't have a copy of called Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer about the expedition on Mount Everest that did not make it very well one May several years ago. So if you're looking for a quick read, this is really exciting.
Okay, for my first one, I don't have an actual copy of the book in front of me. I've been meaning to get a new copy, which I haven't done yet. It's Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you enjoyed the movies, which I know many of you probably did, you will love the books even more, I promise. They're really wonderful. Make sure you read The Hobbit first. So read The Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Really, it's so well known, I don't need to say much about it, but the books really are better than the movies, and so I recommend that for you.
I would actually second what Father Bulso just said. And J.R.R. Tolkien is a Catholic fictional
Yes.
writer, good friends of C.S. Lewis, and so the rich Christian symbolism in that book is actually quite profound. So,
Yes.
not short though.
And not trying to
multi-volumes.
denigrate the movies at all. The movies are great too, but the books are even better.
I like the movies too. So, all right, the second book that I selected was called The Kite Runner. And this one is written by Khaled Hossieni. It is set in Afghanistan before the events of 9/11, back during the era of the monarchy. It is one of the most powerful, haunting books I've ever read. It's about friendship, betrayal, forgiveness, love, and it's a really compelling read, and it also gives you a great insight into another part of the world.
So we mentioned that J.R.R. Tolkien had a friend in C.S. Lewis, so he's the next one up too. I have 2 out of 3 of this trilogy. The third one I have on Kindle. But this is what is commonly called the Space Trilogy from C.S. Lewis. You'll know him obviously from the Chronicles of Narnia. But these are really wonderful. And I would say especially these first 2, as you can tell, they are a very approachable length. The third one is a bit longer. But they're about a doctor who gets, or he's a linguist actually, he gets sent to a couple of different planets. In the first book, out of the silent planet, he goes to Mars. And it turns out that in this world that C.S. Lewis is imagining, these other planets are sort of unfallen planets. So on Earth, Adam and Eve committed original sin, right? And so we were a fallen planet. We were the silent planet. But Mars is full of these other 3 other, I believe, species, sentient species, who are not fallen, and so it's all about that adventure that he goes on. In the second book, Paralandra, which I'm showing you now, the same characters go to Venus, and it turns out there is an analogous couple to Adam and Eve on that planet. So they're right at the beginning of their race. And the evil character is going to try to get them to fall. So anyways, very compelling, a lot of themes, a lot of Christian themes going on. So I think you'll really enjoy those.
I would also second that recommendation of Father Bulso's. I read the science fiction trilogy of C.S. Lewis when I was in college back in the 80s. So I would have to dust my memory banks off to get the whole storyline back. But I thought it was a great follow-up, a little more mature than the Chronicles of Narnia in terms of story form.
Very different from Chronicles of Narnia in that sense.
Deeper, but very profound. So, C.S.
And the
Lewis.
third, by the way, the third book that is called That Hideous Strength, a little bit different from the first 2, and a bit of a curveball, honestly. But if you enjoy the first 2, then you'll enjoy reading that one too.
And I would just add too, C.S. Lewis also wrote a lot of nonfiction that is quite good. So.
Yes. Yes.
He's a good author. So,
You could pick up anything he wrote.
all right, the next one is a series that I discovered several years ago by Louise Penny. And if I had the first book that I read, I would have probably brought it. It's called The Reckoning, A Great Reckoning, excuse me. This one is called Still Life, and she is a series writer. She's written a series of books about a detective working for the Canadian version of the FBI. And they're all set in Canada. Very smart, interesting mystery, detective mystery type story. So any of this series is good. This is about my fourth one to read in this group.
Next recommendation is, I think, probably the least known book that I'm going to recommend. This is called Mr. Blue. Again, a very approachable, friendly length, just over 100 pages. And it's about this character named Mr. Blue, who is a bit of a St. Francis of Assisi figure. So he's a Catholic, and he decides to really live out a radical sort of poverty and a radical way of living out the faith. And it kind of follows him, and you can tell there's a lot of influence from G.K. Chesterton as well. One of the major themes in the book is just the beauty of the present moment and of the world. And there's a really interesting kind of extended passage in the book where Mr. Blue proposes a theme or a plot for a movie, and it's about the very last Christian. And so his proposed movie is about this world in which the world has been taken over by non-religious people, and there's one more Christian. It turns out to be a Catholic priest, and he manages to get a hold of some bread and wine, and he's going to celebrate the Mass, and he's going to bring God back to earth, so to speak. And then it turns out, well, I won't give it away, but anyway, so it's very interesting in that way. It's funny, I thought of this book anyway, and then it turns out it's got some very relevant themes as I was looking through it last night. Let me read you a couple sentences here. This is from Mr. Blue. The printed word is too common to be any longer compelling and too slow to be any longer dynamic. If you want to reach the masses, you can reach them through pictures. And this book is written in 1928. 1928. And one of the major themes in the book is the importance of motion pictures. How true, how accurate that was. So anyways, Mr. Blue.
Wow. Now that book I have not read yet, Father Bulso, so I may have to read it. Although I must admit I had heard of it. So
Okay, good. Yeah.
So I'm sort of you've got me intrigued on that one now. So
You're welcome to borrow it.
okay, super. I have lots of books, but I might pick that one up. It does look approachable, so it doesn't look too thick. So the next one that I chose is a period piece, Cold Mountain, a novel by Charles Frazier. It's a love story set during the Civil War era, and it is hauntingly beautiful for anybody that loves the Appalachian culture and mountains and a little bit of history. It's also a very compelling story.
For my last two, I'm going to switch into sort of high literature sort of recommendations, and this is, you probably have thought about reading this before, maybe didn't feel like you could or didn't want to for whatever reason, so this is my little nudge to go ahead and pick this book up. This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I'm sure many, many of you have seen some sort of film adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, but totally worth picking up the book. Such a great book, just a great story, and so many interesting themes, especially about how pride influences us and how prejudices can make us misjudge people. So, great book, classic literature, and I highly recommend that you actually read the book.
Okay, I have not read that either, nor have I seen any film versions of
Oh my goodness,
so,
okay.
Yeah, I'm a little bit in the dark on Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice is a Bulso family household staple. And I mean, we love the BBC 5 or 6 hour miniseries that they did, and we will put that on anytime, usually, once a month or something.
Oh, I just have to add as an aside, there are a number of television series that Father Bulso and I watch that we probably wouldn't recommend for parishioners, but we did see a new one called The Chosen, which is about the disciples of Jesus. That is free. The 8 episodes are free this month. It was recommended by a parishioner. It's also a good series. Yeah. That's sort of an aside. But all right, my last book is one of my favorites. I like true life stories, and I've read a number of true life adventure stories. And this one is called The Last Season by Eric Blehm. And true story, one of the most experienced park rangers in Kings Canyon National Park goes out to open up part of the remote section of the park one spring and disappears. They can't find him anywhere. So this book is a story of the search to discover what happened to him. And it is definitely a page turner.
My final recommendation, for which I don't have a physical copy again, it happens to be at my parents' house, but another classic, literary classic, Shakespeare's Henry V. Such a great book. I thought of it especially because of the famous St. Crispin's Day speech that Henry V gives. Actually, if you want a little sample, just Google that on YouTube, St. Crispin's Day speech, and check out the Kenneth Branagh portrayal of that, and it'll get you convinced to read the book. I mean, and actually, that's a great way to read Shakespeare, to be honest, is to watch first a film adaptation to help you get a sense of it, and then that helps you kind of dive into the language of Shakespeare, which admittedly is challenging. It's definitely older and not what we're used to, but really a great thing to do to sit down and read that. In the St. Crispin's Day speech, Henry V overhears a couple of his soldiers. They're about to go into battle, right? And they're greatly outnumbered. And he overhears a few of his soldiers wishing for more people there to help them. And Henry V goes into this speech about, "Oh, we happy few, we band of brothers. We don't want anyone else here. We want to have all the fame for ourselves." And it's just such an inspiring speech. And my little paraphrase there was poor adaptation of it. But anyways, so Henry V, Shakespeare.
I've never seen any adaptations of that or read it, but
Oh man,
the quote he just gave, I've heard for years from some of my priest friends. So
yeah.
We know it's not always fun to be at home. Good to get out and do things, but while you are at home, if you're looking for good books, hopefully we've given you some good suggestions. So all of y'all stay well, and look forward to seeing you face to face.
Stay well, stay hopeful.
Amen.